community. A place where people are all working for a greater good. That community. Now, on this, all right, this again goes back to the 1960s. It's in the United States, but it is relevant around the world. There is a term that was created by this sociologist, anthropologist, and it's called the third place. The third place, you mentioned Starbucks. Starbucks managers are trained on this almost monthly, the third place. This anthropologist did this study. Historically, there are three primary places for people. There is where they live, where they work or go to school if they're a student, and where they do life together. In the United States, when we go into a Starbucks now, it's amazing. There are men in suits signing a stack of papers that in days gone by would have only been signed in a lawyer's office or a bank or an office. And now they're sitting in a Starbucks with the suits on and they're signing, initialing pages, signing. You go, holy cow. And in the same Starbucks you turn and there's a group of mothers with their carriages and they have their babies and they're there together. And then you look over here and there's a group of students and they've got their laptops out and their books and they're studying and doing homework. Then there's another group meeting here and then there's an older group here and there's a couple here. It's this whole mix of people because what they've tried to capture is becoming a safe place to do life together. When you look and you have a building, whether the functions used to be the churches were designed to be the third place. For too many guys, it was the old bars or their taverns. And it was, when I grew up as a kid in Omaha, I told you 100 years ago, Omaha, Nebraska had the largest number per capita of bars or taverns. But they were all in neighborhoods. And after work, particularly on Friday or so, the men would go there. And these bars, see, when you say bar in Europe, you get coffee or you can get a gelato or you can get a sandwich and a panini and that. A bar in the United States was just kind of a place to go drink and play pool kind of a thing. But they would have the milk or the bread. They would cash the checks and so forth. And the wives knew if their husband, you know, Frank wasn't home at 9:30, they would call there and say, hey, I know Frank's there. Tell him when he comes home to bring a loaf of bread or a quart of milk. But he went there to process with the other guys life, to talk about life. That was his safe place. It wasn't just a place to go get drunk or to drink. It was a safe place for him as a man to do life, okay? What we've got to create within the context of the big C, not the little c, but is a community of people, for particularly young people, where it's safe for them to talk about, process, and do life together. Okay? And one of the things that you've got to break down, go back to this young lady. Many people kind of grew up with this mentality that there are some things you just can't talk about in church. You know what I mean? If this is sexual in nature, or if it's over, you just can't talk about that in church. We have to change that. And here's what I mean. Church should be the place where you can talk about anything. Now, it needs to be talked about in the right setting and the right context. There are things that with younger people around, you can't talk about in that context, and you shouldn't. We shouldn't steal innocence before God's times, in a sense. But I got to tell you, too many young people have this idea that church is this place where, you know, if it's about sex or dealing with this issue or that, they can't talk about it. I always tell young people, when I'm in a church, you can talk about anything in the right context of the setting. And that for young ladies to know that things of a sexual nature or a very personal nature, there's no safer place to talk about it to get truth than the church, but big C. That means it doesn't necessarily mean it's going to be preached by a pastor on a Sunday morning. Their church may be the Starbucks. It may be sitting someplace quietly to talk about those things in their heart, and them going, I could never talk about that at church, and you being able to say, this is church. You can talk about anything at church. We have to get the right setting within that, because I believe God intended for the whole world to be His church. Okay? So that piece of that, all right? So that's where the people of this church, not necessarily just the building, but you've got to create a safe place, community, to do life, to talk about the things of life, to process life, the good and the bad. You've got to be that for the young people that are single, that are in their teens and that. And when you make those connections, they never want to leave this kind of a place. Okay? The third thing here that young people are looking for is leadership opportunities. They want to be trusted with leadership. I want to suggest to you that as churches, I think one of the key things is we have this hierarchy sometimes. And I don't think it's completely right. I believe in authority. I don't know, when I got here, I asked Pastor for me to be able to kneel and him to pray over me and bless me. But I believe in this, that if we're going to raise up and develop leaders, then older people must be willing to serve under their leadership. And we don't often do that. In order for somebody else to lead where we're at, we have to die first. And so what happens is young people will go places where there appears to be some opportunity for leadership because they believe they can lead, but they still need us to walk with them. It's interesting, 2 days ago, I shared this at the seminary. I'm still kind of processing some of this. I read a blog that's called Enter Adulthood. On there was a guest blog, and this person blogs regularly, and her blog is called The Unlost. She's from a place in Idaho, Boise. And so I signed up just to get the subscription because I want to read what she has to say. I'm guessing she's 27 or 28. And so when I signed up for her blog, it sent an email back and said, thanks for signing up. Tell us a little about you. So I sent back an email and I said, I am what you would call a baby boomer or a senior. I'm 64 years old. I'm a husband, a father, a grandfather, and a devoted follower of Christ. I write, speak, I did this, and I said, look, I'm not trying to draw people from a business standpoint to the websites, but I gave her that. She came back, very nice. And she says, I've looked at your website. She says, it looked like we're interested in some of the same things. And walked through that. And she says, I don't particularly follow any religion. I just try to be a good person, which is reflected in most religions. And so that process was open. But then I sent her back and I said, look, I'm working on a project that I'm targeting at seniors about re-engaging in life and being a part and being available for young people. I said, 2 questions. What do you expect from seniors? And what's the one thing we could do that would help you? She wrote me back. It's interesting because the young man I'm staying with is 28. And I read him this. And she said, I don't really have any contact with seniors. She says, I realized that when I answered this. And she says, not that 64 is old. That's a real nice answer. Yeah, she was just taking care of herself there, let me tell you. She says, not that 64 is old. She says, but I don't. She says, but I really miss that. She says, because it would be great to have somebody to talk to who has had a lot more experience than I have. And she says it's kind of like having a alternate parent, her words, of somebody that I can process things with. And she says, I don't have that, but I think I would really like that. What an amazing statement after 2 emails with a gal I don't even know. And then the question is, what's the one thing that we could do to help the seniors? Her comment was, I think I answered that in the first question. But then she went back and said the same thing. Just be available for me to process life with. That's what she asked. 20-something. Okay? That's this part here. But here's the thing. On her blog, one of the things that she used as a descriptor for her was, I feel I can change the world. She's asking, will anybody older than her really trust her with any leadership, or will she have to do it all on her own? About 4 months ago, I spoke at a men's conference for an Assemblies of God district. And the new men's ministry director is 32 years old. And the conference was primarily older men. And I challenged these men. I said, if you really believe in leadership development and raising up leaders, I will ask you one question. How many of you are willing to not just acknowledge the leadership of this young man, but are willing to serve underneath his leadership? Because I think one of the keys for leadership, and you have to look for that in the church, you need to look for opportunities for these young people to be in leadership roles and raise up others that are older and ask them specifically to serve underneath them. And serve underneath them with honor and dignity. Not to serve on the committee to tell them what to do as they lead it, but to truly serve while they lead. Okay? So, leadership. Now, here's the final thing, the fourth thing. Intergenerational relationships. Intergen relationships. The 20-something young people are looking for places where older people are willing to invest in their life. Now, let me clear up 3 things on the generational. And that is, we use kind of 3 terms. You use the term cross-generational, multi-generational, or intergenerational. Cross-generational is a marketing term. It's an idea or a product or a concept that appeals to more than one generation. Great example of cross-generational marketing, Levi's. Oh yeah. You can see those, with guys in their 60s and 70s, and you see them in their teens, and so forth. You can go through all of those things. That's cross-generational, is how we market things. Multi-generational is a gathering that brings people of different ages. We need cross-generational marketing. We need multi-generational gatherings. Intergenerational is an environment or a culture in which all generations that nurtures and develops intergenerational relationships. Relationships across those generational lines. So you've got to look as a church how you're doing things that invites people from the different ages to participate in that together. Not just to have, say, here's what we're going to do. We're going to feed the poor. We're going to have our youth go over here and they're going to take care of this section. And then we're going to have this group go over here and do this. And then we have a tendency to do that in our churches. What we've got to look for is opportunities where we say, this is what we're going to do. And we're going to build teams that will require older, some younger couples, and some unmarried, and we're going to put them together in a team to go do this. So in doing so, you're going to give them a shared experience. You're going to give them the opportunity to participate in something, and in doing so, in a non-threatening way, you remember the X out here, you're going to give them external non-threatening and give them an opportunity to do those things. And what we know here is these 20-somethings, they are desperate. Our young married couples are desperate for older couples that will at least talk to them. That have been married 20, 30, and sometimes 40 years. Okay? But it works both ways, interestingly enough. One of the things that we have a new pastor at our church. No, we didn't fire or kill the other one. He just happened to go to another church, and we miss him. But we have a good pastor, and he's relaunched our small groups. Okay? And in our small groups, he's also challenged for the mentoring, the relational pieces of this. Here's what happened. My wife, okay, who, let me explain about women's ages, just so you guys know. All right, this is very important, men. This will serve you well. Until a woman turns 30, you can state her age precisely. It's not an offense. So if she's 28 or 29 or 27 or 19, You can ask her age and